Revisiting The Phantom Menace proved to be a painful experience, but in the back of my mind I knew the next one would be even worse. And today, unfortunately, is the day. For Christmas this year, we get to talk about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, my Padawan, David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast, and if you're watching or listening to this on the day it comes out, it's Christmas Eve, so Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
We decided to suffer for your sins this Christmas.
That's Easter, Pete. That's the Easter part.
I don't know. You're always suffering. Jesus is always suffering for people.
Yeah. You know, he was born and it was really uncomfortable and everything sucked.
Yeah, well, you know, Mary had to give birth to a child she hadn't conceived, just like Ian Holm and Alien. So,
literally, like episode 1, Phantom Menace. I thought that's where you were going with this.
No, wait, who was miraculously conceived in the first one?
Anakin. He didn't have a father.
I forgot that detail.
Yeah.
Ah, yes. Today, we are back to the Star Wars prequel trilogy with Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. We will start spoiler-free, just in case you happen to care about such a thing. We'll give you a warning before we get into spoilers, and if you are enjoying the show, do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps out a bunch if you do. And you can also get bonus content for supporting us over on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the show.
Now, Pete, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that this is the most well-regarded of the Star Wars movies, probably more than Empire in a lot of ways.
It's the worst one. Well, I think when we do Rise of Skywalker, there might be a debate. It might not be as clear-cut as it once was, but certainly for a long time, Attack of the Clones, well, as bad as Phantom Menace is, and as bad as Revenge of the Sith is, Attack of the Clones, I think, was, at least majority-wise, considered to be the worst one. And it stayed that way for about...
Would that be two decades?
Just
Decade
under.
and a half? Yeah.
Yeah, about 18 years. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. We'll get into it. We'll give our thoughts or feelings. This is only the second time I've ever watched this. I watched this...
Ooh.
For the first time on cable, about 2 years after it came out, in the cinema, because it's not even like I made a conscious choice at the time that I didn't like Phantom Menace, because when I saw Phantom Menace I was 10 and probably just convinced myself it was great because I was 10. But by the time Attack of the Clones came out, I was 13, and...
You were discerning. You were able to make choices.
And it's not even, like I say, it wasn't even so much a conscious thing. I just didn't want it. I just didn't care. I just didn't care enough to go out my way to see it. I was like, oh, it's on TV now. I guess I'll watch it. And then was just thoroughly bored by it. So I went into this expecting nothing but boredom. So we'll see how much it lived up to that. Or maybe it surprised me. It's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's check the runtime of this review real quick. Oh no. Oh, God. Seems we have a lot to say.
For all you know, this may end up being quite quick. Maybe it'll just be repeating things we said about Phantom Menace, so we'll be done like an hour.
Entirely possible, but I've also blanked a lot of what we said about Phantom Menace from my memory, so...
That's a good point. I mean, this did start with you bringing up something from Phantom Menace that I had forgotten about, so...
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. All right. It's about a decade later in the timeline. Anakin has went from being about a 10-year-old to being a 20-year-old, give or take. Yep. And Obi-Wan's got longer hair and a beard, so he's looking a bit more dignified.
Love Obi-Wan is just 100% Jesus Christ in this. Like, not in like the way he acts, but he just is exactly the white Jesus look, and I love it.
Yes. Also, Padme's back. We'll be talking about her, don't worry. We'll be talking about sand and the fact that it's coarse.
It's multiple properties that make it unideal for living in.
It gets everywhere. Do you know what's so funny is everyone makes fun of him making that sand speech as an example of this movie's bad dialogue and bad romance, but Holy shit. That is not even like the top 5 worst lines of dialogue he has in this.
Nope. Not even.
I was gobsmacked from the very first time he opens his mouth. In particular, as soon as he sees Padme for the first time in this movie, how quickly he careens down a cliff as David's destroying things on his desk.
I was about to knock over a very full drink, and I am very glad I did not.
He careens down this ravine that is a combination of whiny, angsty teenager and, dare I say, incel?
Look. Here's exactly how I feel Hayden Christensen was, quote unquote, directed here. You have to play a boy who just before he hit puberty had a really great time with this girl and then never saw another girl ever again for like 10 years. And like, how awkward would you be in that sort of situation? And I feel he nailed that because, dear Lord, this man was the most uncomfortable person to be around at every single step of the way.
Actually, like the second line of dialogue he has towards her is, "You've only gotten more beautiful for a senator." I mean,
what? Good save. My favorite one is the one that comes like 2 minutes later, where he's like, "Oh, she shut off the cameras. I don't think she liked me watching her."
Yes, maybe think about why she feels that way, young Anakin. Maybe give that some thought. Honestly, the romance in this is one of the most egregious in any movie I have ever seen at being guilty of a very particular type of romance that I have only come to hate more as I have grown older and with a more level-headed view of the world. And that is, whiny man keeps pestering and badgering the woman who says, no, it's not happening, until all of a sudden at some point, 2/3 through the story, she just goes, "Yeah, I was lying the whole time. I'm actually into you as well." What? No, like there was no sign of that. There was no. It's just all of a sudden. I mean, it's not the first sign of it. Don't get me wrong. She does have a moment or two before then.
Yeah.
But like, when that first moment happens, there is nothing to suggest that he has done anything endearing or anything that would, like encourage, like. Okay, it's one thing, he makes it clear he's got a crush, she's not interested, that's fine, right? But he's not a little tit about it, he doesn't act like a creep like he does in this movie. Let's say he acts normal, but he's like a good enough person around her, or he goes out of his way to save her or protect her or something.
Yeah.
You could see that after a few scenarios, maybe she starts to think, oh, you know what, he's actually this really sweet, dedicated person. Maybe I'm starting to feel a tinge of something. But no, every single effing scene, he says something to remind her, I am rock hard for you. Why won't you give me attention? I deserve attention. I deserve women.
All right, so clip that. Make that its own thing. No, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. Here's the thing. We'll get more into it as the movie progresses, but one of the major problems of this movie is pacing. It is a horribly paced film, and because of the way that they cut around these quote-unquote romance scenes, because of the way that they interject it with whatever it is Obi-Wan's doing in his plot, it gets to be more and more jarring because it feels like it's supposed to play out as this longer sort of montage-esque sequence where we see them slowly bonding and coming in over time. But instead, it just feels like every time we cut back to it, it gets more and more jarring of, oh, all of a sudden they're like deeper in love, but I don't feel like we were there. We didn't get to this point. We never earned this happening, to the point where, like you said, when it does finally end up flipping, it's like, this is wrong. This is just wrong. You've done this in the wrong way. It doesn't make sense. I don't like this, and yet you're gonna just stick to it.
It's just straight up bullshit, frankly, when it starts making turns. And it suffers from this problem where she keeps saying, no, we can't for this reason, that reason. She never once says the age difference is a problem, which I thought was concerning, but she does.
I mean, it's 5 years.
Well, she might be 15 in the last one.
Yeah, she's like 14, 15, whereas he's like 9 or 10. It's like
okay,
5
okay.
years.
Well, okay, fine. You can tell me that's what she was supposed to be in the last one, but she did not look 14, 15 in the last one.
Fair enough.
Right? So, to me, there's like a decade of a difference here, but like, fair enough. You're telling me the kayfabe is that there's only 5 years?
Clearly, Anakin has mommy issues.
Right.
So,
I mean, yeah, she looks like his mom, which is, a point of contention perhaps one could bring up. But I also want to say that one of the first things she says to him, when he makes it clear he finds her attractive, she responds with, "You'll always be that little boy I met 10 years ago." And I'm like, dude, she's telling you that in no way, shape, or form you will ever be a sexual option, right? You're just a child to her.
In my head, she said that line and it cuts over to Anakin, like his face dropping, and then it just hard cuts to his YouTube channel. Like, this is why women don't get it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say it. Hayden Christensen is garbage in this movie, right? Now, I'm sure the direction he was given was not great. I'm sure the script is not good. In fact, I know for a fact it's not good.
Yeah, we saw it. It was there.
But he, like, you're giving me a character, right, who's supposed to be this tragic story, and the key thing to a tragic story about a character who's going to eventually become a villain, because that's ultimately what this character is. He's going to be Darth Vader, goddammit. Is that you have to make me care about the fact and feel that sense of tragedy. Like, I have to care about him so that I care when he falls from grace, when he makes the wrong choices. And from the very first second of this movie, he's like, "Obi-Wan, you don't understand me. You won't let me. You're just jealous of me, Obi-Wan. Master Obi-Wan doesn't get me or understand me. He's always complaining. Hey, Padme, you're beautiful. Oh, why won't you let me say you're beautiful? Oh," like, it just, from the first second, it's like, why don't we get a character who starts off feeling like he is kind of good and then have it be chipped away over the course of the movie? Instead of giving me a character who clearly already wants to be evil from the very first second we see him.
Honestly, I mean, it's a little bit spoilers, but I'm going to do my best to avoid it here. This movie ends with a very clear direction of what happens next to these characters. And I think that what happens next to these characters is 100% enough to drive any character that's pre-set up before this to a path of villainy. They can see some shit. Like, it can be enough to drive them down this path. So this movie, the first movie was Anakin being young, innocent, discovering he has this potential. This movie should have been 100% him being cocky and overconfident. People have been telling him all this time, you might be the chosen one, you're great at this. He should have just been cocky and overconfident, but none of this whininess. He should have been owning up. He should have been showing why he is so good. Then when we get to the third movie, that's where you show the very quick descent where he's gone through a bunch of stuff between movies, and we get to see where that fall from grace really happens.
Do you know what I think the logic was here from Georgie boy, George Lucas, is I think he thought Luke started a little bit whiny. And he was a little bit whiny in the first movie. But here's the thing. There was a purpose for that whininess in the first movie, is because the whole point of Luke's character in the first movie is that he felt like he was destined to be great, but he was being held back by his uncle and like the people around him. He was being kind of like shielded from what he felt like he was supposed to be, and that's where the frustration came from, and that's why he wanted to break away. That said, though, his whininess was never as annoying as anything Anakin's doing in this movie. He always it always felt understandable, like his frustrations, as opposed to being just this irritating brat. I feel like George said to himself, "We're going to do that poetry, repetition, it rhymes, right? We're going to do that thing where by the end of the second movie, minor spoilers here, it's like he's going to lose a hand because Luke lost the hand by the end of the second Star Wars movie, so on and so on. But Luke was kind of whiny when he was this age, so we have to have Anakin be whiny. The problem is, though, is like I said, the reason why Luke was whiny is because he wasn't being given a chance to be what he felt maybe he could be, whether or not he knew exactly what that was, or if it was just like a feeling inside, whatever. Anakin is training to be a Jedi and has been actively out on Jedi missions for the past decade with Obi-Wan. He's been given these important assignments. He's got, like... he doesn't have the right to be as whiny as this.
It's literally like, if any of us normal people on Earth were given the chance to like go up into space, and then while we're up there, we're complaining that there aren't enough cup holders. Like, shut up. You're doing the cool thing. Like, what are you doing? It's the same thing there. Like, Luke was a farm boy. He was stuck at home. He hated moisture farming. But then you get Anakin, and he's like, oh, God, why do I have to go on the boring mission where I get to go to the beautiful planet and spend my time with the beautiful woman? God, this sucks.
Yeah, also, Padme, for a woman who keeps saying, oh, we can't have a romance, she keeps taking him to the most, like, beautiful postcard scenes that you could possibly imagine. Let's go to have a picnic in front of the waterfall, but we can fall in love.
There is a sequence here where Hayden Christensen like gives his best performance that he can muster. It ain't good, but he gives his best performance he can. And Padme is wearing like a black choker and a tube top
it's like
that's like chained together. And I'm like, yeah, it's like she's clearly trying to get to cross-use something here, dude.
She's saying he's not being dominant enough. She wants a dominant man if she's wearing that.
Exactly. So please whine some more. Also, I mean, should we mention that this is literally only half the plot? There is a whole nother side of things going on in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the other thing that follows from Empire. And one of the things that I dislike about Empire, actually, is that it splits the characters up. And this follows that structure where it takes Obi-Wan and Anakin and says, no, they're going to both do their own thing for, like, 70% of the movie. You know, they'll start together, they'll split up, we'll get all the middle of the movie, and then they'll finally be back together at the end. And they're both going to do their own thing. And the problem with that, the hindrance with that, and Last Jedi is going to do this as well, and I didn't like it in Last Jedi either, is that if the individual plots don't feel strong enough on their own, and neither one feels like the A plot, you end up with this weird feeling of there not being an A plot, and you're just watching two side plots.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I felt like when I was watching this.
Yeah, I think if I had to be in the writer's room, I would assume that the A plot is the Anakin plot. I think that that would be the intention in the writing, but it is so boring that it shouldn't be. The A plot should be the Obi-Wan plot, and yet it doesn't feel like it because it was given this sort of side saddle kind of status.
Yeah. Not to say it wasn't also boring, because it was.
I mean, at least they had a fight scene. At least they like had something going on. I'll give them anything.
I'll see what you're saying, but it's still like his investigation is like the most dull. Like, and at least, like, so we complained, or I complained about the direction, the first movie, and like how it looked and whatnot. This one was the first one in the series that was actually shot digitally, and like some of the teething pains of being one of the first. It wasn't the first movie in general to do that, but the teething pains of being in the early days of that. Plus the fact that there's so many scenes in this movie where two characters are just talking in front of a very flat-looking like CG background.
Oh my god!
Right, where there's no depth to it, and on top of that, sometimes the compositing for the green screen isn't even good. There's a scene like, I don't know, halfway or so through it, maybe even a bit later, but there's a scene where it cuts back to Yoda because he's like sensing that something's going on with Anakin, right? In Mace Windu, Samuel L. Jackson like comes in the room and sort of sits down like over by the window, and it's a fairly small room. Yeah. And it's very clearly a green screen background with a CG wall and like window with blinds that are put in behind them, and the composition looks like shit. And one, it shouldn't look this bad in a big professional movie, even in 2002. This is not like a dating like an aging problem. This is this could have been better at the time for sure. But I also thought, why is this a CG background? It's like a small room with like blinds. Like it's just bright light coming through some blinds. This could just be a set.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm like 90% sure they built this room in Phantom Menace. Like I think that they had this room. Sure, the outside windows or whatever were definitely CG'd in, but like I think they built this room for the previous movie.
It's baffling. I don't know. But there's lots of scenes where there's just the backgrounds just have this disconnect, and I mean you can have the disconnect to a point, but the fact that they also felt very flat a lot of the time, like there's times when they're walking down what's supposed to be this big grand hallway, and it just looks so flat behind them, and that was like happening a lot.
That sequence, the sequence of two characters walking and it feels flat behind them. I noticed it slightly in this movie, but if there's one thing I definitively remember about Revenge of the Sith, it's that. It is that every conversation was, we are about to run out of walkway, so we need to have this conversation even slower. Like, we have to take one step every other word.
Yep. So that was something that was sticking out to me in this one. Not that it wasn't kind of a problem in the last one, but this one felt even more limited in its spaces. And there's a lot more CG locations in this one as well. There's like a sort of gladiatorial, like kind of like Colosseum style area in the third act.
I'll say that's the other thing, back with the pacing thing. I could tell you where the first act ended. I could not even begin to tell you where the third act started until we were already like 2/3 of the way through it. Because everything just felt so flat the entire time through of, is this the big action scene? No? Okay, this is just a little, is this the, no? Okay. Oh, it was. Okay, cool, great. And then we finally get to the end.
And the last act sort of drags on as well, because I was convinced that I was in the conclusion at one point, and then I checked the time and there was 25 minutes left, and I went, Jesus.
Yeah.
Movie, what are you doing? So
I thought this movie was a 2-hour long one, and I saw it was 2-hour-20. I'm like, I got to give it that much, a little bit extra.
Hey, once you're over 2 hours, it really starts to feel like every minute after 2 hours feels like you need to earn it. If you're going over 2 hours, you have to earn that extra time by making me care. And would you believe it? This movie did not make me care.
What a shock.
I actually watched it in 2 parts because I knew I'd have to. I knew I couldn't stomach it in one sitting.
Well, I hate that I had to go through it all at once, but I guess good job for you. You know your limits.
I started it early because I knew I was going to have to take a break, and I had a nice 2-hour break in the middle where I had something to eat and
2 hours. Goddamn.
Let my brain reset a little bit, and then I was like, okay, I guess I'll go back and watch the rest of that stupid movie.
That feels like a cheat to me. I know it's not, but it feels like a cheat.
Feels like a cheat. It's not supposed to be an endurance test.
You got on me for, and I agree this is a cheat, but you got on me once for, I mentioned that I had the ability to watch something at 1.5 speed, and I didn't.
That is cheating.
But that's what it feels like you're not watching this as it's intended, and you're like getting a little bit of an extra thing out of it.
Look, if you want to split a long movie into 2 parts, you're more than welcome to do that without any consequence.
No, that's fine. I would agree for something like Solaris or whatever, but I feel like 2 hours 20 doesn't quite cross that limit of long movie yet.
Well, yeah, but it feels long.
Oh, it feels...
It's a slog.
Well, in that case, I could have paused in the middle of Hot Frosty. That would have been enough for me to just take a break.
Oh, I'm sure I did. That was a long-ass 90 minutes, David. You gotta pace yourself with these things.
Fair. Maybe that's when my health is failing. I just keep on marathoning through these things.
That was an X Reels episode, everyone, just in case you're curious. We'll tell you more about that at the end. So as far as other spoiler-free things go, so yes, the compositing for the green screen's not good. It's distracting, honestly, at times. It's, we'll talk a lot more about what it does with the plot and the lore once we actually get into the spoilers. But I mean, I guess the other thing, if I was going to add anything, I'll add on a positive. I'll say one nice thing.
Wow.
The sound mix is kind of alright. Like the 5.1 sound mix was quite lively, lots of surround, lots of subwoofer. It was nice and loud. Anytime there was like a chase with vehicles or anything, there was lots of whooshing and whatnot. Right, that's all I've got. That's my one positive I've got for you.
I mean, sticking to the sound, I will always say that Williams does a good score. I will say I'm a little bit disappointed that they hung so heavily on the more romantic tracks than the I'm actually having fun tracks, but still a good score. It wasn't a bad one.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like, obviously, Williams did a good job, but I can't really like sit and feel that positive about it in the sense that, well, like he did 3 good Star Wars scores for good Star Wars movies, and now he's doing Star Wars scores for bad Star Wars movies. And yes, they are better than most of the other things that are in the movie, but it's not saving the movie for me by any means.
No. There was one point where they pull up, not the full version, but like a little more reserved mix of Duel of the Fates, and I was like, yeah, Like, as much as Phantom Menace sucked, and this sucks more, I kind of want another Duel of the Fates moment, but never quite got there.
Yeah. There's some fan servicey things that are in there. As much as George Lucas didn't do as much of that, perhaps, as what some later things would end up, having. But there's some stuff, particularly related to a certain bounty hunter, which we'll get into.
I mean, if you're talking about people who know Star Wars lore, I'm sure that actually opens the door up to hundreds of possibilities. But for anyone who knows Star Wars very casually, that's one person.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yes. A character that I've always found overrated. I've never understood why Star Wars fans have such a love for him.
Pete, remind me real quick, what was the community reaction on our Phantom Menace review? Was that positive or?
Well, I mean, generally it was fine, but yeah, there was one or two comments of like, "Oh, these are just nerds." But Joe, what got me though about the comments that were mad that we were bad mouthing Phantom Menace is that the tone. One implied they didn't listen to a single word we actually said, but
of course.
There was kind of this assumption that we were big Star Wars fans who have just always been butthurt by the prequels. And I'm like, I'm not a big Star Wars fan. I'll happily tell you what I don't like about Empire Strikes Back when most Star Wars fans wouldn't dare say a negative thing about that movie.
Right, and clearly because you're bad-mouthing a certain Fett, so...
Yeah, well... Anyway, spoilers, I guess. We're just get spoilers.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to talk about some stuff without it, but I'm pretty sure anybody who's coming into this is already going to break past the spoiler wall. So whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the first thing, the opening text scroll. It's not exactly the most exciting, adventurous sounding thing, but I will say that it's a slight step up from taxation disputes about a trade union or something, whatever it was in the first one.
I was so happy, like, reading that of, like, oh, it's not about, like, the separatists and the trade federation and yawn. Instead, it, like, this talks about the Republic is trying to vote to, like, form an army and, like, this big thing is happening here. It's like, okay, all right, that's something at least. There's this big, it's still political intrigue and I'm bored out of my mind, but at least it's not taxes.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that bugs me is that the movie almost stumbles into a good idea much later on in the movie. And I was frustrated that it kind of like hand waves it away with, no, it's just more simple than that and there's a bad guy. Because later on, like Count Dooku, which is Christopher Lee's character, who's like an evil Jedi later, or a Sith, I guess, is what we call him.
He's a Sith. But
he was a Jedi, but he became a Sith.
He was a Jedi, he became a Sith, but it's also weird in this movie because, like, he's kind of straddling that line still, where he's still calling himself a Jedi, so...
Yeah, well, yeah. Are Sith Jedi still Jedi, though? Like, I mean, they're not in the Jedi Council, but I guess he's playing fast and loose with the terms.
Most Sith who are really into it would consider it they were not Jedi. They would look at themselves as, Jedi scum sort of thing.
Anyway, what I was getting at, though, is that there's a point where he, for like 30 seconds, tries to convince Obi-Wan that he's actually the good guy, and he's aware that there's a Sith who's taking control of the Senate, and that he's trying to like fight a war against the Sith that no one else seems to know exists. And Obi-Wan sort of shuts it down. And for a split second, I thought, you know what? I know he's going to turn out to just be a bad guy who's working for Palpatine anyway, but that actually sounds like an interesting plot for a second there, where there's actually someone who they all think is turned into a villain is actually the one good guy who's trying to stop the evil emperor from taking over. That actually sounds like an interesting idea, but the movie just shits it away.
That was the one thing in the last movie that I absolutely loved, was that Qui-Gon, Liam Neeson's character, was 100% like, I think that the Jedi Council's being stupid a lot of the time, and I think that we should go out and be able to do things differently. And the way that they set this up in this movie is that Dooku is Qui-Gon's, I forget the exact term for it, but his trainer, the guy who is in charge of...
Actually, I need to jump in here, because that's pissed me off. There's a line later on that implies that Yoda trained Dooku, Dooku trained Qui-Gon, Qui-Gon trained Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan trained Anakin.
Yep.
This is the same problem with everyone being related to someone else, is that every goddamn Jedi we've ever met is in the same lineage. What about Mace? Who's he training? Couldn't Dooku have been trained by some other random old Jedi? No.
First off, Samuel L. Jackson would absolutely just shoot some guy if he had to train him. He wouldn't take the time for that. Secondly, I will say that it is a recurring thing where multiple people get trained by the same person. So it's not just a one-to-one thing. So Yoda's trained dozens of people. It just happens that one of the people was Dooku, and I'm sure Dooku trained dozens as well. So
yeah, but no one we've met was trained by the one with the tentacle ears over there. Oh
yeah, Kit Fisto. He's the best.
All right.
I know a shocking amount of Star Wars trivia that I didn't even know I knew until we're going through these things. But no, the point I was trying to make earlier though is that they walk through this lineage. They say that Qui-Gon was trained by him. And there's almost this sense of a screw the Jedi Order, but not in an evil way. Just we shouldn't be content with the way things are. We should be shaking it up a bit. So when they say that Dooku is telling them, hey, there's a Sith in charge of the Senate. This is why Qui-Gon was not cool with stuff. It's why I'm not cool with stuff. He gets it. Why don't you get it, Obi-Wan? I'm like, yes, that's an interesting plot. I really want to see that play out.
Almost like it would be Jedi versus Jedi over an ideological difference. Yeah. Which is more complex and hard to decide which one you side with. Mm-hmm. But no, he's just an evil Sith.
Yeah, he's just an evil one. Whatever.
Yeah, it's just all the interesting stuff that potentially it was almost doing. Now, admittedly, at that point in the movie, an hour and 40 ending, you're already bored out your goddamn mind. So it wouldn't have saved anything. But
no. But it could have set up something really cool for the next one.
yes, very possible. So anyway, yes, opening crawl, blah blah. Padme is doing the same trick as the first movie, where she's got a decoy dressed as her.
I have to check if that's still Keira Knightley. I feel like it is.
I don't know if it was. I was looking for... Apparently, Roseburn is in this movie somewhere.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. It's not Keira Knightley, at least, so I will check to see if she gets a name, and then I'll see for that name.
Yeah, so... but there is an assassination attempt. Her ship gets blown up. But Padme wasn't there, of course. She was disguised as one of the servants or whatever, so she's fine, and she has a whole dying in her arms, and it's oh, this is terrible. We need you're here to vote on whether or not we should build an army to try and take on this, because Dooku's basically leading a movement where a bunch of planets in the Republic are going to defect and say, no, we're separate now. And if this breaks out into war, the Jedi aren't ready yet, or they don't have enough to actually fight a whole war. So do we actually build an army of some kind? And that's what they're all there to vote on and whatnot.
Yeah, I like the concept. Obviously, from the last one, you had the Trade Federation. This one, it throws in the Bankers Guild and a bunch of other stuff. And it is essentially half the galaxy is trying to split off here. What I do question in this specific setting is that Padme's coming in to vote against the army. They do say that at one point. She's coming in and she's like, no, we shouldn't have an army. It's only going to exacerbate things.
She thinks it'll provoke the separatists into more militant action, because they'll see that as them arming up.
Right. And maybe she's right. Maybe she's not. Obviously, the plot doesn't play out that way. But it is interesting to me that later on in the movie, she's just totally cool with having the army.
Yeah. There's definitely a more interesting plot, not a Star Wars plot admittedly, but there's a more interesting plot about the debate of what to do in this situation as these tensions are rising. But the movie kind of sidesteps actually really dealing with it, other than these one or two little references to it, because it's because very quickly we get shooed away from that, and it's okay, you need some escorts to protect you. How about someone you're comfortable with that you've met before? How about Obi-Wan Kenobi? So
how about someone you're comfortable with that you met before? Like Obi-Wan, the guy you didn't spend any time with because he was stuck on the ship. Or Anakin, the 10-year-old boy who was totally crushing on you the whole time.
Oh, not in the first movie he wasn't, was he?
He was crushing on her.
Was he? Okay.
His first words were, "Are you an angel?"
I mean, that that's a bit. See, again, this is the age difference. Is like to me that wasn't like crushing in a romantic sense. I mean, maybe like it's a bit different. Whereas here, like even before he sees her, he's in the elevator with Obi-Wan, and he's like, "Oh, I feel sick. I'm thinking about Padme here, Obi-Wan. Oh, my lightsaber's
I was
going
gonna
up."
say, Obi-Wan looks down and says, "Oh, it looks like your lightsaber's unhinged. Wait a minute."
And then all Obi-Wan ever says is, don't let your thoughts betray you. Don't let your feelings betray you. You're a Jedi. You have to shoo all that stuff out. And of course, Padme later on, I noticed this, is a bad influence, at least from the perspective of like him being a good Jedi, because she's like, no, your feelings are what make you human.
Oh, yeah.
Feel your feelings, Anakin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, she's a bad influence, but it's more so in that she's saying that in a sense of trying to calm him down because she's feeling the feelings regardless. She's just trying to say like, hey, maybe don't beat yourself up so bad about it. You know, like it's going to happen. You're going to slide a few times. He's like, no, I'm a Jedi. I shouldn't be messing up.
So, yeah, immediately he starts dropping. Like, so the funny is I cringed when he first said, "Oh, you've only gotten more," because she says like, "Oh, you've gotten so big," or whatever she says, and he's like, "Oh, you've only gotten so beautiful." I mean, for a senator, blah, right? And he tries to cover it up, and I cringed when he said that, and I thought, Jesus, like literally the first line out of his mouth to her is like awkward, like trying to engage in a romance. It's uncomfortable. It's weird. Blah blah blah. I was begging for that though. In the next scenes that he has with her, where like, you know, there's a moment, I think it's in the next scene they have where she's like packing in her bedroom or whatever, and he's just talking to her, and he's complaining about Obi-Wan like the whole time. He's like, oh yeah, Obi-Wan's like a great Jedi trainer, but you know, he doesn't really understand me, and he's like, you know, he's whinging, right?
He's literally saying like, oh, he's wiser than Yoda in some ways and a great skilled fighter than Mace Windu, but I'm better than him.
Also, yeah, okay, you can tell me that Mace Windu is like respected as one of the best fighters, but like we only saw him sitting in a chair in the last movie, so this is like, you know, show me, don't tell me.
The greatest fighter never needs to draw his sword, Pete.
Yeah, it's all right, or stand up apparently.
Nope.
Right. And he comes over and he's got like, there's a moment here where he stares at her like he wants to bang right now. Like he stares at her like, oh, you piece of meat.
It's the worst moment because she sees it. She recognizes it and she says, please don't look at me like that. And he says, why? As if like trying to egg her on. And she's like, it's really uncomfortable. And I'm like, okay, dude, if you get a girl feeling uncomfortable from you looking at her, you need to ease back, man.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It's not just that he's like, because before, okay, he stumbles into being kind of awkward and cheesy, right? And it's whatever. And again, she kind of like subtle's maybe not the right word, but her saying, "Oh, you'll always be that little boy I met 10 years ago," is her shooting that down. She's shooting down the notion that there's any chance of a romantic attraction right then and there. And then this scene happens. He stares at her, and I think you actually undersold it when she says, "Stop looking at me like that." He's like, why not? And he gives her another, like, he sort of changes the look to be like, why not, eh? Wink, wink. And she's like, because I don't like it. She's actively telling him, no, stop doing that. It's making me feel uncomfortable.
And then as she walks away, he's still just like staring at her with a smirk like, oh yeah, all according to plan. This is really working out.
Yeah, he's got a look in his face like, oh, I'm wearing her down. She's going to be... And the sad part is he's right. It does wear her down.
I have to imagine this is like how he grew up, where he just like whined to Watto in the shop until Watto finally just gave in and was just like, fine, whatever, do what you got to do. And he's like, yes, whining works.
Oh, dear. Oh, geez, yeah. So that night, like, apparently... And this would have been an interesting scene to actually see, is like him and her forming this plan. Because Obi-Wan comes in, and Anakin, this is where that line, as you mentioned earlier, where he's like, oh, she's in her room, but I'm out here because she didn't like me looking at her or something, whatever the line was.
She was covered up the cameras, and he's like, oh, and it's like, yeah, she didn't like me watching her. It's like, well,
which again,
duh.
Take the hint, Anakin. Take the hint that you've stepped over a line. She feels uncomfortable. Yeah. Right? And it's like, oh, but it's okay because I sense everything in that room. And it's like, okay, fine, Jedi powers, whatever. Right?
I can feel her.
But basically Obi-Wan's like, oh wait, you're using her as bait. You're basically putting her in this place where someone's going to try and attack. And he goes, well, yeah, but it was actually her idea. So like she said, she volunteered for that.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, there's something interesting potentially about her and Anakin without any of the adults around to actually, and not that they're not also adults, especially Padme, but the idea these two on their own are like, hey, let's think differently than the old guard. Let's just set a trap and catch whoever's trying to kill me. And I almost think that actually seeing that conversation play out might have actually made this more instead of just cutting and then having Anakin just go, oh yeah, it's just a trap. Yeah, we'll set this up. It's fine.
Well, it was there was the earlier sequence when they just first started meeting, and Padme's basically like, so you're going to help find who's trying to kill me, right? And Obi-Wan's like, nope. We're just here as security. Like, we're just going to make sure nobody else kills you. But then Anakin jumps in, like, of course we're going to find out. Like, absolutely. That's I will die for you, my queen. And
he starts like questioning his boss in front of everyone else, which is super uncomfortable. And I'm like, Obi-Wan, you better be ready to slap him because he is making you look like a chump.
And
right
he
now.
is, because Obi-Wan's just like, that's not what we're here for, man. We're following the council's orders. And he's like, well, it was implied in the orders. He's like, it wasn't implied. Screw you, man.
Yes. So sure enough, actually, there's a moment here where Obi-Wan's like, hey, you having those dreams about your mother again? And he's like, yeah, I've been thinking about her a lot. He's like, dreams will pass. They always do. I'm like, hey, Obi-Wan, maybe not disregard. This kid's feelings are going to lead to him becoming a genocidal maniac. So maybe let's therapy him a little bit.
I feel like that should have been a thing back when, like, Obi-Wan was like, look, I will train you. I will become your thing. Yoda should have stepped in being like, if he does anything weird, you tell us, man, because this is a no-go in a lot of ways.
Exploring how like Obi-Wan might actually have guilt that he wasn't enough of like a father figure to him when he needed him, and instead he went for the stern just Jedi master. Like, but that could also be an interesting thing to look at.
I will say, I don't think either of us watched the Obi-Wan show. It might do that.
I mean, I watched the first episode. I don't remember anything it did though.
All right, fair enough.
I was bored out of my mind, is all I recall.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that could be an interesting thing to like sort of like what role did the people around him play in like him becoming what he became. But anyway, so assassin strikes, but they strike with like a droid thing that puts some bugs into the like some millipede looking things.
Peter, you are nowhere near making this convoluted enough.
Okay,
Jango Fett shows up and goes to the changeling named Zeb Sewell or something like that, and is like, hey, kill the senator. So then the senator gets a droid, or sorry, the assassin gets a droid and says, hey, kill the senator. Then the droid gets some worms, and the droid tells the worms, hey, kill the senator.
Yeah, did we actually get scenes of him going to hire her, though? I don't think we did, did we? Mm-hmm. Oh, we did? Okay, fair enough.
They said, the ship exploded, but it was a double. Use these worms instead.
Okay. I had forgotten that little insert. Also, Jango Fett's a bounty hunter. Don't bounty hunters, like, assassinate their own targets, typically?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I thought that was a bit strange.
Yeah, we just needed it so that Jango Fett was not directly there, so that way we could go on this wild Mary Goose chase across the galaxy.
Yes. We had to set up the rest of the plot. So, when they run in, first of all, Anakin... Because they sense what's going on, like they just sort of feel it, right? He feels it, he's
it's literally mid-sentence and just like my penis.
he jumps up out of the bed and cuts this bug thing like in half with the lightsaber. This like basically on her face or on her chest, and I'm like, oh, you were very accurate with that. You'd have very upset her if you like sliced into her. Obi-Wan though is like, I can't stand being around this little shit anymore. I'm going to jump out the window.
And luckily enough for him, there was actually something there.
Yes, the droid that let the bugs in. He grabs onto that and goes for a merry ride. And we get this big car chase sequence through the skies of the city, which, like, the audio was very good. Like, when I said the 5-point mix was good, this was one of the scenes where the audio did sound really good. It's one of those things, though, where I like it's probably the closest the movie gets to being fun, if they give it, like, a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying with that, and it is like a decently fun thing, but so much of what this chase is just feels like, and we put this in for the video game. Like there's one point where the assassin sets up like a power coupling grid and all this electricity is across, and then Obi-Wan's like, Anakin, look out, and they go right through it, and you think, oh no, are they going to stall out? Are they going to crash?
Oh,
no,
you're right.
It was just like a mild inconvenience.
You're right, and there's also a lot of like Anakin just taking a leap of faith off the space car and going down hundreds of feet and then landing on the villain's car and stuff like that, which, like, it's fine. I don't know. I
get what you're saying, that it's fun. Like, it is a
whoa. I said it was the closest
to fun.
To fun that this movie, guys. It was fun.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. Fair enough. So I get what you're saying when you say it's the closest to fun, but it is also kind of just...
It's hollow.
That same sort of like flat that you were talking about before. It doesn't feel like it has any sort of real stakes or any sort of real intrigue here. And ultimately, when this sequence is all wrapped up, nothing changes. Nothing is different. Like, we don't get any new information. All we get is a single dart, and that leads us on the entire rest of the thing. So we could have just as easily have had it been, oh, we found this dart in Padme's room, and then we just go on this entire thing.
That's true. It's an excuse for an action sequence because they knew the movie was already boring enough. They need something here to spice things up.
Right.
But it's pretty hollow, and largely because the Jedi are they go out of their way to have them feel like, oh, like nothing can touch them for large amounts of time. And the problem with that, though, is that when you have a scene like this, it feels like neither of them are in danger, even though they're technically falling like from obscene heights. It feels like it should be absurdly dangerous, but it never feels that they're actually in any danger.
Just before the end of the sequence, we had Obi-Wan falling out of the sky. Anakin has to lower the car that he's driving underneath him, and then like continue lowering at the same speed so that Obi-Wan can like gently hit it rather than crash into it. And he gets in, and then he gets in the car with him. 2 minutes later, Anakin jumps out of the car. He hits that thing at top speed. Totally fine. Doesn't matter. So despite them even showing that they have to take a little bit of care for their own safety, they then immediately say, like, but he would have been fine regardless.
Yeah, the only the positive thing I'll say, I guess, is that it at least makes sense that Anakin is... So like basically the way it plays out is that Obi-Wan keeps saying, oh, I hate when you do this, I hate when you do this, and he keeps sort of making little comments like that. And I thought that made sense to me based on who they set up Anakin to be in the first movie, is that he is this hotshot pilot who can do all these close calls, he can do these really...
I'm sorry, which of us blew up the space station with the shield generator during the droid fight? I think, oh yeah, that's right, that was me. I did that.
That's probably exactly how Anakin would say it as well, if we're thinking about it. So at least that felt like a continuation of the character they set up in the last movie. Now, it doesn't end up really being much of a factor for the rest of the movie. He doesn't fly a single thing himself the rest of the movie.
That's so weird, yeah.
But at least this felt like a continuation of that in some level. So
I mean, I get what you're saying there, but it also kind of feels... Because that was a line in New Hope. That was a line of Ben Kenobi saying he was the greatest pilot I've ever known. So it kind of feels like they're just beholden to keep inserting these scenes for the sake of, we said it happened in New Hope. That's also, I mean, spoilers. The next line after that is, your father fought in the Clone Wars. The whole reason we have a Clone Wars is because of a single line in New Hope. Yes,
that is fair. At the very least, though, like, because they set it up in Phantom Menace, I can at least say that this here is a continuation of that, as opposed to it's just there because of something they said. Whereas, yes, the Clone Wars stuff is just because they said there was a Clone Wars, so they have to sort of like put that in somewhere, even though it actually doesn't happen in the movie. It just starts in the movie and then it's over, I think, for the start of the next one.
And then it's 8 seasons of an animated show.
There's an animated show, yes, indeed, which Star Wars fans swear by. They think it's the greatest thing ever, but I mean, I've never watched it, and I never will. So
sounds to me like a Patreon goal. Look at that.
Goal?
I don't know. Can you set Patreon goals?
I mean, you used to be able to. I don't know if you still can, but stop doing it. I mean, there's a tier to make me watch a TV show, but I mean, you're gonna have to pony up for that if you want to make me do it.
8 seasons. Let's get on it.
It's gonna take a while. I'll say that much. So they end up at like a bar. and they sort of hang out. Like, by this point, Anakin kind of saw enough to think, oh, it's a changeling. It's not just an assassin. But Jango Fett hits the assassin with a dart to kill them before they can say anything.
Yeah, they just do they literally do the cantina scene of chopping off the arm when they go to attack. They do the Jedi mind trick there as well, and then they just bring the assassin outside, and as soon as they're about to give up the information, it's just zip, done.
Yep. So this is where the movie's about to split into the two plots, because there's a couple of scenes of characters talking about what to do. I'm not going to say I remember any of those, really. But it's basically Padme is in danger here still, because this is a really busy planet. So let's have her go back to Naboo.
Yep.
To be a second back on it. Right. Back to Naboo with Anakin as an escort, to basically, go under the radar, don't fly in a registered ship, go as like passengers on some bigger thing, and just sort of slip in, and you'll be safer there. You can stay by her side as a bodyguard. Go and do that. And then Obi-Wan will investigate this assassin, the bounty hunter, and go down that path. Which leads to a scene where, I feel like the first chunk of Obi-Wan's plot you could sum up very quickly. He goes to a diner, talks to an old alien friend who recognizes this dart thing and says, oh, that probably came from these dudes. Obi-Wan goes to the Library of Planets, looks up the planet and goes, the planet's not there, that's fishy. Ask Yoda for help. They do a bit of scanning or whatever. I don't know.
They literally, okay, so just backtrack. I need to mention this diner for a minute.
Oh, good to go. Yes.
Okay, look, I understand that we're impossible to divorce from the culture that we grow up in. I get it. I understand that. There's always, these people, as much as they say that the language is called basic, it's English, fine, whatever. Why is there a 50s aesthetic diner in space? I don't get it. I don't understand. They don't give me anything to say why the 50s existed in space a long time ago. It's just, it bothers me. But regardless, he goes to the archives. He finds out that the planet is not listed there. And it'd be one thing if at that moment he's like, well, I should go check to see where the planet is. Like, it should be there. And we find out in a later scene, he even sees that the gravity is like still attracting to that point. So everything is saying there should be something there except for the archives. But he still decides he has to go to Yoda, who's teaching like a preschool class.
Whoa. They're all doing the thing that Luke was doing in the first movie, where they've all got the helmets on that are blindfolding them, and they've got lightsabers, but they're all like 7 or 8, so it looks like this looks dangerous. Like, why have you given all these children like this tool that can cut through anything?
Just set to stun, they're fine.
Yeah, all right.
But yeah, he comes in and he's basically saying to Yoda, like, hey, I was told there's a planet there, but there's not. And Yoda also seems to understand, like, this seems like a really easy problem. Preschoolers, is there anything that Obi-Wan should be doing? And one of them is just like, the planet's probably still there, was just deleted from the archives. And Yoda's like, yeah, that's right. Get to it, Obi-Wan.
Yes, probably by someone on the inside who's evil.
Yes.
Conspiracy theories.
Who could possibly delete something from the archives? And Yoda goes, you'll probably find out. Get over there.
Which actually reminds me, there's a scene somewhere in the Anakin and Padme. So we're going to stick with Obi-Wan, but there's one of the scenes with Padme and Panakin.
Padme and Panakin. I love it.
Padme and Anakin, where they bring up Palpatine at one point, and I swear Anakin starts going, oh, he's a great man. He'll do great things one day. Like, oh, yeah. All right. It's the same with, there's a really on-the-nose joke earlier on, actually, with Obi-Wan, where he's like, you'll be the death of me, Anakin. And I'm like, yeah, it will be.
During one of the conversations, they're just sitting out in like a meadow, like a little forest, and they're talking about like, oh, I don't think democracy works. And I'm like, really? Darth Vader doesn't think democracy? Wow, what a shock.
Anyway, so Obi-Wan goes to search for this planet, and it is Camino. Sure, I'll take your word for it. But it's the robot species, or the species that clone, make clones, right? And it turns out that someone from the Jedi Council a decade ago ordered an army of clones, which is a bit suspicious because it's only just recently that they've started talking about maybe having an army. And the Jedi that did it was apparently been dead for quite some time.
Yeah, I Googled this guy just to see if it would be a quick and easy backstory. It wasn't.
Okay.
It's a whole thing. It basically, he was just another disillusioned Jedi, but like he was a conspiracy theory one, and he was like, the big war's coming, guys. I'm gonna get us an army so that we're ready when it comes. So he was just kind of a prepper in the Jedi Order.
So these clones are all based on Jango Fett. They're all clones of him. And part of his agreeing to be the host to a bunch of clones is that he wants one unaltered clone for, because all the regular clones are all like sped up aging and they all have
it's like double speed or whatever.
Yeah, and probably have some like, I don't know, some control.
Yeah,
like,
they said there was like
aspects.
behavioral to make them more docile, which I'm not sure that's what you want in a soldier, but okay.
But you basically wanted a son, and would you believe it? Jango Fett's son might just be named Boba.
Who would have thought? And I gotta give George Lucas some credit here. He went through Phantom Menace and saw the reaction to Jake Lloyd and said, yes, I'll do another child actor. That'll go well.
I just to skip to much later on, after Jango Fett dies and Boba like picks up his helmet and holds it to his head and like that side shot, I'm like, F you, movie. F you and your prequel bait bullshit.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Like, I'm not even caring so much that, like, fine, all right, we've established that Boba Fett, like, you know, took on the mantle, did whatever. I'm fine with all that. Why did it need to be established here during this fight? You know, establish that Boba Fett exists. Fine, I'm cool with that. But why did we have to see his entire origin story unfold during this thing that is also a huge moment for everybody else?
Because creative bankruptcy. It's the same reason why everyone's related to each other. It's the same reason why every Jedi trained every other Jedi, you know? Because we have to make everything connect in the most obvious fan fiction-y way.
As much as everyone like spits all over Last Jedi, I really liked what Rian Johnson was doing there of, no, you're not important. You're not related to anybody. You're just something totally new. We're not going to connect this. And then JJ comes back. He's like, screw you, Rian.
Pretty sure it's just pronounced Ryan, but...
Is it Ryan?
Yeah.
All right. I've heard it different ways.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say Rian.
I mean, that was the way I heard it back during Knives Out times, but maybe that was just before.
I mean, it's possible I'm wrong. It is possible, but I just thought it was a weird spelling of Ryan.
No, that's fair.
Anyway, so he meets Django, does Obi-Wan, and it's just a bit passive-aggressive. They just kind of, like, I thought, again, there's like almost an interesting thing here that Obi-Wan is just like, because he shows up and this species are like, hey, yeah, we've almost got those clones ready you ordered. And he's like, yeah. Tell me again, when did we order these clones and who did that? And
did we already pay for that, or do I need to make a call?
Like, the idea of him stumbling into this thing that's already in motion is, again, possibly interesting. But of course, it all just devolves into, oh, Django tries to run away and, you know, Obi-Wan spots him and they have a bit of a fight and plants a tracking device on his ship as he flies away. So we have a bit of a chase through a minefield so we can have another random action scene that doesn't really, like, matter or have any impact on anything.
Yeah. No, you're right. I was trying to think if there's literally anything that it impacts, but it is just kind of a delay. And they do people swear by these seismic charges, specifically the sound they make, of like how it's dead silent and then just this like blah sound. It's cool, but God knows it doesn't add anything to the plot.
Yeah, it just, like, it doesn't, like, he just ends up getting there a bit later than they do. That's it. Yeah. And
you know what every scene in this feels like, if we're comparing it to Empire? Every scene feels like that worm in the asteroid scene. Like that giant creature that it doesn't add anything to the plot. It just kind of exists to slow them down. And we just keep doing that until we hit the third act.
It's a bad script. It's bad writing. It's just we keep having obstacles that don't actually add anything to the themes of the story of the movie. They're just obstacles for the sake of having obstacles. And that's it. and that's most of Obi-Wan's plot, annoyingly. And then ultimately he gets captured just as he sends out a message to to Anakin first, so that like people know to come and like, hey, there's something going on. But
yeah, they're on the planet Genoza?
I don't know. But I mean, that's basically his whole plot. I mean, there's that one scene, and we kind of already talked about it, where Dooku kind of says a bunch of lies about why he's doing this. But other than that, that's kind of it.
Yeah, and then next we get is in the Colosseum.
Yeah,
which is where the plots reconverge.
So back to the A game. Anakin and Padme and their romance that happens here, where I mean, at first, of course, they go and speak to the current queen, and there's a whole bit here which is making me cringe, where he talks about how you were such a great queen in Naboo, you should have like changed the constitution to have a third term, and I'm like, Anakin, shut the F up! No one wants to hear that right now.
Dude, every single thing he says, I know why you're saying it like modern day, but like every single thing he says just like is furthering and furthering this idea of like, I don't think people should ever be in charge of things. I just want to make decisions myself. And like, as a former slave, I can understand where he's coming from, but talking to a democratically elected senator, like, she should be throwing up every red flag here and being like, get away from me, you incel freak.
Because so that's the thing, like we joked recently about the famous meme from this movie where they're sitting in the fancy field, right? Although again, it's a very flat green screen, like waterfall in the background behind them, but in the field, right? And it's the meme is, of course, is that like he says something and she says, yeah, but not like that, right? And then he just stares at her with a smirk on his face, and then she looks kind of mortified. I'd long forgotten what the original dialogue was for that gets replaced for the meme. The dialogue for that scene is literally, hey Anakin, that sounds a lot like fascism. You don't want to be fascist, do you? Evil smile.
And he's like, well, if it works.
Evil smile. Huh? And then eventually, like I don't even know who laughs first, but they kind of play it off as like, oh, he's joshing.
Yeah, she's like, oh, you're teasing me, aren't you? And he's like, yeah, totally. But like, how hard would it be to get a third term though?
It's just, oh god, like everything, because there's even before they go out for this, right? Because this is what I was getting at earlier, where they have a scene on the balcony when they've barely been on the planet, right? So it feels like they've had no time to develop any feelings. It feels like they're still doing the exact same thing, where he tries to make a suggestion of a romance and she just ignores it or beats it away, whatever she's feeling for that particular moment.
Right.
And they have this moment where she actually starts to, like, this is right after he talks about sand, for the record, where she actually sort of leans in and he kisses her, and then she pulls him in and says, no, I shouldn't have done that. We can't do that. You're a Jedi. I'm a politician. I'm in the Republic Council, blah, blah, blah. And gives all these reasons why it can't happen, even if they did have feelings. So, first of all, I'm like, okay, your feelings just came out of nowhere, Padme, so thanks for that. But every scene after this, though, it's like, okay, you're telling him we can't be romantically involved. Let's have a romantic dinner by the fireplace. Let's go out and have a picnic in front of a waterfall, which then leads to, like, let's, like, ride on a really bad CG bull or, like, rhino, and Anakin's CG, and he falls off really awkwardly, and then they literally roll about in the hay together.
And that's what leads to the fascist talk. Yeah.
And that's what leads to the fascist talk.
Okay, so here's something with the pacing that I wanted to bring up, and this is something that I think makes the romance worse in like the way that it's edited, is that we are intercutting between them seemingly over the course of what feels like should be at least a full day, but most likely several days.
Yeah.
The in-between cuts are Obi-Wan exploring the clone facility, which feels like every time we cut away and then cut back to him, at most 5 minutes have passed. So that cause and effect there of seeing no time passing for Obi-Wan, but then going back to them and some time has passed, makes it feel like their romance is hyper condensed, and all of this time that they're supposedly spending growing closer together isn't actually a lot of time at all.
I mean, that is a problem. Like, you're right, that is absolutely causing a disconnect between the time passage of both plots. But that's not the biggest problem, though. The biggest problem is the fact that the scenes themselves are just him whining and then her giving in, and then they have a romantic moment out of nowhere where she actually looks into his eyes or whatever. Like, see if he actually, I don't know, instead of complaining about sand or saying how much he's up for fascism, right? See if he like said or did something where we saw a reaction on her face that said, oh wow, I really respect what he just said, or oh wow, he's like actually a really forward thinking person for this one thing. Now, regardless of where your story's going to go later, like have them like see some kids like struggle, and maybe he's really good with the kid, maybe he gives really good advice to a child or something and shows compassion, and she sees that and she sort of like has that look in her face like, oh man,
the passion, everything while they're on Naboo should be 100% just, okay, we are growing closer as friends to some extent. And then it's only once she sees him open up emotionally on Tatooine again, and like the hurt and the pain he's going through, that some emotional bond should be formed there.
Yes, all of a sudden halfway through we're on our way to Tatooine.
Yes, but I do need to interject right before then.
Yes, on you go.
The pear eating scene is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. They are having a dinner.
It's just so funny. I didn't even realize that was meant to be a pear, because it felt like Did they sci-fi it up a little bit?
Yeah, when he cuts into it, it has a little bit of like a blue tint on the inside of the fruit, so it's a little sci-fi, but it's a pear. Like, that's all it is.
He impresses her by using his Jedi powers to like bring it towards him, and he cuts it, and then
he cuts it and floats it back into her mouth. But like, it's all CG, so if you watch her fork like stabbing into it makes it like it doesn't line up, and then when she brings it to her mouth, she's like an inch away from actually biting into it. It's a horribly choreographed.
It was the same earlier on when Obi-Wan hugged his alien friend at the diner. It's like there was a real sort of disconnect of him. You could just tell on set he was just kind of, I'll just ballpark this like here and just hope for the best.
That's about right. He said he was big. There we go. But the part that got me the most about the pear eating scene is the fact that every single time one of these sequence ends, we cut over to the other plot. We go over to the Obi-Wan plot. This is the one time we don't. So as soon as he's done passing this pear over and he smiles at her and it's a whole thing, we then cut to the fireplace scene where she's wearing a choker collar and like a whole BDSM thing going on here. And he's just all in. He's just like, my heart beats for you. I need you. I want you. And she's like,
I ache.
No, we can't do this though. And then like, it just ends with her basically saying like, we would be forced to live a lie. And he's like, I don't care. Look, I'm not saying that I am completely against keeping my virginity, but I'd really like to lose it.
Yeah, because he suggests we could just do it in secret. No one has to know. It could just be for us. And she's like, oh, no, that would be living a lie, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it's like, yeah, we can't do this. We can't do this, Anakin. And given what she's wearing, given the setting of what they're doing, and like I said, all these things.
Romantic fireplace.
I'm like, she might as well say, Anakin, we can never be together, and then like put a banana in her mouth and like seductively eat it. Like, no, Anakin, we can never engage in sexual activity. Here, lick this kiwi fruit.
Yeah. Anakin, we can't possibly do this. By the way, do you like whipped cream?
Anakin, would you like me to give you a blow? By blow, account of what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yes. Anakin, I could really use some heads up whenever you are going to be leaving the building. It's very important that I know where you are.
Anyway, so he's been thinking about his mother. I'll be honest,
another nightmare.
He has a nightmare. I actually kind of stopped paying attention for a minute. Was there a scene where he like sort of said how he felt about his mother to Padme, and she said, "Yeah, let's go"?
He mentions that he's been having the nightmares and how he's like, I see her so clearly, something's wrong, but I can't leave you alone here. And she's like, okay, well, I'll come with. Like,
yeah, by the way,
whatever.
Obi-Wan kind of looks like a dick when it turns out the reason why these nightmares started a month ago is because that's when she was kidnapped and held by Tusken Raiders for this past month as a captive.
Yeah, I feel like somebody in the Jedi Council would be at some point in training like, hey, if you have dreams that seem like really clear, that's the Force. That's the Force doing that. Listen to the Force. That's kind of our whole thing.
Yeah, it just makes Obi-Wan, unless it's just like, oh, he's so powerful that most Jedi don't experience this, but it's only because Anakin's like the chosen one.
Yeah.
That he's
I mean,
experiencing
maybe
this.
it's entirely possible, but I feel like at least Yoda would have been given the heads up of like, yeah, no, prophecy dream, that's a thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so they go to Tatooine and he meets was it Watto? The alien,
the guy from the first movie.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, it's Annie. And he's like, where's my mom? I demand my mother now. And he's like, I sold her like 5 years ago. But I hear she got married though to a farmer or something.
So technically happy ending, right?
Yeah. So he goes, and of course it's where Luke's uncle in that, Uncle Ben's place from the original Star Wars.
It's Uncle Owen.
Oh, sorry. That's my Spider-Man.
I was gonna say he follows the exact same storyline as Uncle Ben, though. You're right.
Sorry, Uncle Owen, who is a young Joel Edgerton, which is funny just because no one knew who he was when this movie came out, but now people do know who he is. So
I didn't even recognize him at first. I was like, he looked really familiar.
Do you know what? I was expecting him, but only because he's in the Obi-Wan show.
Oh, they got him back for that?
Yeah, they got him back for it. He's in the first episode of that. And I'm like, oh, this is so ballsy. Like all these like prequel-y things coming back. Like, yeah, wise choice. But yeah, basically they find out that his mom married this farmer, and Owen is now his step brother. So this was like the son that the husband already had. And
it wouldn't eventually it would have made sense that he met Beru. We didn't have to introduce Aunt Beru here, but wouldn't you know it, he's already dating Aunt Beru, and she's just hanging around the homestead. Yep.
I really, Joe, it probably wasn't, but part of me wants to think that they made Phantom Menace, and then someone said to George, "Hey, he was staying with his uncle in Star Wars. Shouldn't that mean that Anakin has a brother?" And then George went, "Shit, I need to fix that."
There was a video, I can't remember who made it, that was basically all about fixing the prequel trilogy. It was like 3-part series. Really liked it, but I loved how they made the comment of like, you do understand that in like a lot of cultures, close friends can be regarded as aunts and uncles to the children. Like, it doesn't have to be literal. And I kind of just wanted that. Like, fine, whatever, you want to jump through hoops to make them actually related, so be it. But you could have just made it so much easier on yourself.
And even if it wasn't a cultural thing, it could just be the thing where they tell him, "Hey, I'm your uncle," just to like make him feel like he's part of the family he's supposed to be with. Like,
yeah. Plus, I mean, that's I mean, spoilers for by the time we hit the end of episode 3, but like, they say like, oh, we have to separate them because they have to stay safe. One of them will go into royalty and the other one will go to this random ass moisture farm that didn't even know that she existed. Like, what?
Anyway, so yeah, they find out that Tusken Raiders kidnapped her about a month ago. Everyone's basically accepted her for dead. They did go looking for her. A lot of people died looking for her, but that's basically what's happened. And Anakin immediately gets up and is like, "I'm going to go find her. Thank you very much." And we get
I have good reason to believe she's not dead.
I can sense her. But we get the Luke Skywalker Force theme plays as he rides off. So it's like just exactly where Luke was staring at the sunset in the original movie. He rides off, goes looking for her.
I'd say this is the one sequence, him riding off on the speeder, the dual sun setting in the background, him then talking to like Jawas to get more information. This is the one sequence I thought Anakin is okay here. He is driven, he is motivated, and he's not whining his ass off.
You know what? Okay, I'll give you it. The moment where they say they've assumed she's dead, and he stands up and says, "I'm going to go get my mom," and the husband says, "She's dead, son," and he just sort of ignores him and goes and does it anyway. That is the closest he ever comes to being a likable hero, because he's like not going to give up on the person he wants to save.
Yep.
It's sullied by everything else. Yeah, it's sullied by everything else that's already happened, so I already don't care about him. But like, and on paper, I could see that being an okay moment for sure.
Yep.
But he finds his mother, who's on her deathbed. She's like tied up in like a tent, and she dies as she tries to say, "I love you, Annie. I love you," and croaks. And obviously, it's an important character point for him that he snaps, and for revenge, not because he's doing a good Jedi thing and protecting people, for revenge, out of anger, he whips out his lightsaber and starts killing the Tusken Raiders. It cuts away before you see a lot of it, but it's implied that he goes and just murders them all.
It's implied it's not just the men, but it's the women and the children.
Well, that's not
too.
implied. He flat out says to Padme, I didn't just kill the men. I went after their women and children as well.
So, look, I hate that I laugh at this every time I see it. Not that moment. Not the moment where like he talks about the kids, but the death scene, the actual death scene. Because in every other like film, whenever they need to show someone has died in a little like a serene way, a way of like, oh, this is a tragic moment, but like an emotional one, so we need to take a tender beat, the character just drifts off or like stops breathing, and like that's it. This film, for whatever reason, has a close-up on her face as she's struggling to get out I love you, and then decides to go for a pulled back shot of her in Anakin's arms as her head just goes, and it's such a comedic, cartoonish fall backwards of like, and now I'm dead. I just laugh at it every time. Like, how much would it have taken to just say, okay, cradle her head in your arms so she doesn't have this dramatic head falling backwards action?
Yeah, I think it also doesn't help that this is the first time we see her in the whole movie. It's just for her,
True.
you know, cliche death scene where she like has some dying words. Like, it might have meant more if we'd gotten a like. Imagine we got a scene at the start of the. What if instead of like, what I mean, we started with the Padme like assassination attempt, I guess, but what if we started with a quiet scene like a western, right, where they're on the farm and it's you recognize this location from the original Star Wars, and she's like, you know, doing something, she's pumping some milk or something or water or whatever, right, and you just see like Tusken Raiders like in the distance, right, and you don't see it actually happening, you just see them coming towards, and it cuts away as like an ominous like little tease for later, just enough to like, okay, that's Anakin's mother, she's in danger, like, you know, just something to like give you that hook early on in the movie.
Like, I wouldn't even need it to be that early on. I think that just having that, like, okay, we've reintroduced Anakin, maybe we get the elevator scene or whatever, but then there's a night in between that and the first protection of Padme. And that's where we get, because remember, in Empire as well, I think, we have the sequence where Luke goes into the swamps of Dagobah, and he has, like, that vision of him fighting Vader.
Yeah.
Like we have context in the original trilogy of showing what Jedi visions look like. We can do something like that here. We can have it be more than just, oh, it's a bad dream. Like, have him have this vision of him finding his mother in this horrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking if it's not a vision, you'd put it at the start, because technically it takes place before anything else in the movie, because it's meant to have, you know, because he's already having the dreams when we first meet him at the start of the film, so... Yeah. But regardless, just anything that makes it feel more than just the death, because that's all she's here for. She's here for her death scene and nothing else. And it boils her down to her purpose and his story and nothing more. So, you know, he has his... Because, you know, the image of him walking back with her body wrapped up in linen and, like, the family seeing it and, like, you know, Padme seeing him in this, like, tender moment where he's going to bury his own mother and like what that means to him, and you know, she met his mother, so like she has some good context for who she was
there.
Like that could be a moment of tragedy where she lets the boundary go down, so she's like, you know what, he needs comfort right now, he doesn't need me telling him, you know, to keep distance from me.
I'll excuse the fascist talk for just a little bit.
Right, you could do something with that, and there's maybe more potential there. But and there's also like it's around here as well, where like he's in the same location that Luke's in the original movie when he's talking to R2.
Like the garage.
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, I'm good at fixing things, and I'm special." But Obi-Wan doesn't see it. Obi-Wan, it's all his fault. The way I am.
One day, I'm gonna be the best Jedi, and I'm gonna stop people from dying, and I'm gonna not let anyone die.
And then Padme's like, "You don't mean that, Anakin." And I'm like, whoa, that's a weird time for you to finally have a problem with what he said. I mean, him saying he's going to stop anyone from dying at least has a noble side to it.
Like, if he was saying, I'm going to stop anyone from dying, and also, everyone has to listen to everything I say. It's like, okay, well, hold on. One doesn't relate to the other there, Anakin.
I'm going to get absolute peace, and I'll kill whoever it takes to get it.
Yeah, and this is the part where he goes out and says, like, I killed them all. I slaughtered them like animals because that's what they are. And like, Again, fascism, one of the major traits is dehumanizing language. It's making your enemies less than human. But he's upset, so there's a little bit of an excuse here.
I just think it's a mistake to have him do something this blatantly evil in this movie. Because fundamentally, he should get close and consider. But here's an idea. Maybe Padme's presence, whether or not she actually intervenes directly or says something, or just her existence, is what holds him back. It's what makes him stops him from going too far, and that's why you further justify the idea that, and not to spoil too much, but in the third movie, I don't remember a lot, but I'm pretty sure it's her death that really motivates him to fully go Darth Vader at the end.
That's what I was saying at the beginning. The horrors of war are enough to make people question their most basic moral standings. You have this movie showing how much of a freaking badass and chosen one he is, and then let the Clone Wars do the heavy lifting of blurring that moral line to the point where he does start going fascist. That's where it needs to happen. Not here, not yet.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got this problem where it's doing beats that arguably it shouldn't be doing until the next movie. Like, give us a likable version of him first that starts to maybe like show the signs by the end, but not actually cross over into them. Maybe have him secretly do one bad thing that no one else knows about, so that we know that he's started to cross a line or something. But I think the other problem with the movie is just the writing, where there's not a single shred of his character that is, and I dare say this word, is subtext. Everything is said blatantly out loud so that the audience doesn't have to think about a goddamn thing.
Let me ask you something. If this wasn't 10 years later, if this was instead 5 years later, and he was a petulant little 13, 14-year-old, all the writing kept the same, do you think this would work better?
I mean, the romance would be even weirder, but...
discount that.
Look, at that point, this is a 14-year-old talking to a 19-year-old.
At this point, we're getting to the statutory parables, and that's a bit much.
Yeah, because then Padme's like, no, it can't happen. You're a Jedi, I'm a councilwoman, also you're a child.
I'm all grown up. I'm all grown up.
Padme, my balls dropped just last week. I'm ready. Yeah. I'm ready.
I've been having these dreams where my mother, and then also you, and it's very confusing.
I keep having this dream where I'm like, I sound like an astronaut, and there's like a breathing sound. It's really weird.
Yeah. That's a good point. Why does the future sight never take you that far? Why is it always just to like right before then? Why is it never like, I've had these dreams where I got this really cool ass cape, but everything's in like red tint, and I don't know why. Because
the future's uncertain. He's not made the choice to go down the dark path yet.
Gotcha.
So it's only up until then.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I trying to get to? Just everything's, there's no subtext to it. Everything's just him blatantly saying out loud that he's having fascist thoughts. Like, he can't just like show that he is attracted to Padme. He has to say it with his first line of dialogue. Like, that is just over and over again throughout the entire movie. Yeah. There is not a lick of subtext.
I mean, I would even say that just proving your point, during the scene where she's buried, he walks over, he kneels before her grave, and instead of just having a powerful moment of silence, he's like, I love you, Mom. I wasn't strong enough, but I will be strong enough. I will be the strongest there ever was. Yes, we get it. You are hurt and you want to save people now. We get it. God, man. Stop spelling it out.
Yep, no. Like, even regardless of all the other problems, it just makes anything that is happening less interesting because it is just talking down to the audience the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no room for interpretation. Like, there's not even a single lick of it. There's
no room to act. Like, as much as Hayden Christensen is barely doing it, like, even if he was an acting powerhouse, there's no room to put any sort of subtleties into a performance.
Yeah, see every other actor in this movie who doesn't really have a chance to properly act.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So this is the next thing is the one time the C plot manages to bump its head up in here, which is throughout Obi-Wan's stuff before he was caught by Count Dooku, he manages to contact and says, hey, I found Count Dooku. The bounty hunter's here. There's a whole droid army. I'm going to need some backup. And then he gets captured. And that's where Anakin and Padme decide that they're going to go on a rescue mission. But before that, we get the cut over to the council, like the Senate and all that.
Yeah, they re-send the message to them so that the council all knows what's happening.
Yeah, and the Senate is basically like, well, we need this army passed, but we can't get this army passed because of all the stuff being held up. We need to put emergency council powers into Palpatine. But who will be the fall guy that's stupid enough to put that forward before the Senate? Hard cut, Jar Jar Binks.
Sure. We did see him a little bit near the start of the movie, but yeah, this is the memorable part where he's the one announcing that Palpatine has been given the emergency, like, dictator-style role so that he can put this into action. And Palpatine has the audacity to say that when they're through these harsh times, he will gladly relinquish any powers that he's been given today. And I'm like, oh, I'll bet you will.
I love it how he says that. He's like, I love democracy. I love the people. I'm not going to hold on to these powers. Very first thing, we're building an army. We are going to war.
Yes.
Oh, once the crisis is averted, but you just announced we're going to war, so you got a while.
Yes, yes, and he says something about making the Republic great again. It was really strange.
Yep. He kept on doing this with his hands. I wasn't sure what it meant.
It's actually kind of like the parallels you could make if you try a little bit are really quite shocking. All right, so Padme and Anakin go to the planet where Obi-Wan's been held captive, and there's a purpose to this action scene in that they get captured as well by the end, but that's the only thing that matters, right? We get this over-the-top thing where, because this is where the other side, right, the Separatists are building their droid army. Yep. We get the assembly line scene, which is nothing but CG and actors awkwardly pretending to dodge big CG things that are, you know, coming down and stamping things. And I foolishly thought that Anakin lost his arm in this scene because it gets like welded down into like a flat metal thing. And I thought, oh, this is how he loses his hand, forgetting like how he actually loses it. But then eventually when it just gets hit enough with more stamp things, it breaks apart and it's like, oh no, his hand's fine. Okay.
Yeah, this is the point where he loses his lightsaber.
Yes.
It gets cut in half and he's like, oh man, Obi-Wan's gonna kill me. That's like the 5th one I've got.
And then the other big thing with Padme is that she's in like a melting pot thing that's about to fill up with molten metal and whatnot. Crucible. And we've like, you know what? We've not even mentioned that R2's been around, or that they run into C-3PO, who's still with where the mum was living, because it doesn't matter. They are completely inconsequential to this movie.
C-3PO has an entire plot where his head gets knocked off, welded onto a droid body, and then a droid head gets put onto his body. They're both put into the final battle, and then he gets knocked over, and R2 repairs the bodies. That happens. That's an entire thing, but I'm pretty sure it was just because the actor for C-3PO is contractually obligated to show in every movie.
It feels like just obligatory. We have to have R2 and C-3PO, and the only time they really affect any of the plot is that during the melting pot thing where Padme almost gets melted, R2 like hacks into it and like stops it from doing it, and that is the only time they affect anything in the plot.
Which, again, if it felt like Padme being in the melting pot was a naturally occurring consequence of everything that came before it, I'd say, okay, fine, you need a way to stop that, so be it, this is the way you do it. But it was not naturally occurring. They manufactured this to happen for the sake of tension, and then they got rid of it just as artificially. So this is a video game level. This is all this entire sequence is. I was having flashbacks, despite the fact it came out later, to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull's jungle fight scene, where it's like, this doesn't serve anything except to be a cool level in the Lego video game.
Actually, it's funny you bring up video game, because like, I'm not saying that the CG in this is looking like a video game, although to be honest, video games have gotten so good with their graphics that we're
at this point it probably has.
At this point it probably is. But when I say that a lot of scenes in this were reminding me of a video game, especially the big action scenes where there were ships involved and stuff like that, and lots of green screen, it's not so much that I'm talking about the quality of the CG itself, but more in the way it's directed and the lack of like certain camera moves. It felt like the sort of cutscene that you would get at the start of like a Blizzard video game at times, with the way it would be like, okay, here's the big fancy CG ship we built. Isn't that cool? It'll wish past us. But there's like a very kind of uninspired like way it's edited together. It just feels really, really clinical in a weird sense. And it feels like a movie should be doing better than that, but it feels, I don't know, it just like clearly Lucas just had lost his touch for putting these things together with these prequels.
No, I mean, it feels like there was a vision for this of like how it was supposed to be, this bombastic thing, but by the time it actually got onto film, like they realized that there were limitations of what they filmed and what they could actually put in like CGI and whatnot, and they kind of just kept on making concessions the whole way through. They were like, well, we can't do that, so we're going to have to do this instead. And they just kept cutting back the vision until we ended up with this, well, at least it tells the story kind of setting, rather than it being actual visual theming or anything like that throughout the course of the entire story.
Yeah. So, yeah, not particularly fond of this sequence, I have to say. As fun as on paper it sounds, like people are in a giant assembly line and they're dodging all these like robot arms coming down with welding tools and whatnot.
I mean, you say it sounds fun. Like, it is a solid, I'm looking at the thing, a 7-minute long sequence. And even just talking about it after the fact of, oh yeah, it's this assembly line thing and all that, I think my first question would be, okay, what does that contribute? Like, what does that add to the story? Like,
it doesn't.
What's the consequence?
The reason why I say it sounds fun on paper as an action scene is because I would assume, if you told me what the concept of the scene was, I would assume that, you know, the hero would be using what's happening around them to help win fights. Like, you know, pull enemies into the path of different versions of tools that are coming down. And not that it's a slasher movie where you want fun, like, deaths per se, but, you know, like, use the environment in a way that, you know, all it really ever amounts to is him dodging all these things. He just keeps dodging stuff. That's all it is.
Yeah, there were goons to fight, maybe like very first like 3 shots of this, and he does push them into the conveyor belt and like they get stomped by stuff, and it's okay, that's nice. But then all the goons stop coming, and it just is like, all right, you have to time your jump. Here's the quick time event. Press X now. Like, all right, sure, whatever.
And I think the other problem as well is that there's not really much of a purpose to the location in the context of the scene. They just, like, where they sneak into the building, this just happens to be what's there when they get in. See if it was like, oh, Obi-Wan's at the other side of this big place, and this is the only way through, and we're getting chased by bad guys, we've got no choice but to go through, but the prize is at the end of this obstacle course. Okay, you've got a clear goal, you've got a sense of geography, and you've got what they're trying to get to. But instead, they just kind of stumble into it, and it's almost like a comedy of errors, where like, okay, now you're just in this hijinks-filled factory, and all this stuff's going on. But the only thing that really matters is that, okay, at the end of it, they get captured, right? They're caught off guard, the lightsaber's gone, that's it. So they're put out into the Colosseum with Obi-Wan.
Oh, Peter. Okay. You're missing the capper to the plot. Just before they go out into the Colosseum. And,
the romance?
And Padme turns to Anakin and says, look, it would have ruined our lives if we had gotten together, but we're about to go die anyway, so I need to tell you, I love you, Anakin. And they share a kiss as they are carted off to their certain death.
Yes, so it's lots of CG alien-looking bugs are all clapping and whatnot in the crowd. Dooku's there, which this is another thing. Maybe, like, obviously we saw Dooku a couple of times before this scene. We saw him, like, when Obi-Wan was spying on him, and then obviously the one-on-one scene with him. But, like, maybe establishing... If Dooku's going to be our main villain for this movie, maybe establish him a bit more earlier on. Like, give us a couple of scenes with him or something.
You get in order here. The first thing that happens is that Obi-Wan goes to the aliens that were doing the cloning, and they mention a Jedi named Sifo Dyas. And it's like, oh, this guy went behind the Jedi Order's back and, like, made this clone army and all that, and he is presumed to be dead. So, like, this guy sounds like he's the villain. Like, he's doing something bad, and, like, maybe that's who Dooku is. Maybe that's what this is gonna end up being. And then when he goes and talks to Jango Fett, he says, I've never met Sifo Dyas. I don't know who that is. I was hired by a guy named Tyrannus. And it turns out that's who Dooku is. Like, we don't know it yet, but that's his Sith name. And then, like you said, it takes another like 30 minutes after that until we finally get the introduction of who Dooku is. And he's just a dude sitting at a table, like getting trade negotiations done. So ultimately, he's not a powerful villain until you get to the very end of the third act. And then it's like, oh, okay, I guess he's here now, whatever.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he's a better Jedi or Force user than every other character.
Right.
Right, but yeah, but it's not built up that way.
He's best at the Force. He's able to combat all of them in lightsaber. He's just the coolest of the cool.
Yeah.
And he's also 90.
I think at this point he's a little bit 80.
Yeah.
But yeah, Christopher Lee was already a pretty old dude. That's a fair thing to say. To be fair, though, he does bring presence with him, so he has that, going for the character. But but before we get to any of that, though, we get all of this dodging the big CG alien dogs thing that are trying to kill the main characters until eventually it turns out that enough time has passed that Mace Windu and the entire like Jedi Council have arrived, so we can have our big fight where there's like dozens of Jedi all fighting droids in a big sort of battle scene, and it's just fluff. It's just fluff.
I'm sure it was really cool for the actors, and I'm sure I can see the pitch meeting. I can see George Lucas being like, this is going to be the first time that we've got a bunch of Jedi all fighting at once, and people are really going to enjoy that. That's really going to be something cool. I get it. In paper, it sounds awesome. But in the end, it's a blur of nonsense violence that doesn't have any sort of stakes to it. Like, it doesn't feel like it, to the point where Jango Fett is killed by Mace Windu in this, and I first thought is, oh, that's it?
He gets beheaded, which sounds on paper like, oh, that sounds like a big scene. He's going to kill Boba Fett's dad by beheading him with a lightsaber. And it just, so much of this and I really felt this as well when we got to the duels later on, but so much of the lightsaber fighting just feels like, okay, the actors held their lightsabers, which again, when they're shooting, wouldn't even be, maybe they'd have like a beam of light or something to simulate what the light is.
I think they would have like a rod at the end and then they CGI that out.
Yeah. Like they're basically just waving it around, and then someone CG's in like the alien dog things they're hitting, or the droids that are, because the droids are all CG as well. It's not like it's not like there's physical droids that they're hitting or pretending to hit. Like they are just waving these things around, and then everything else has been CG'd in around them. The background CG, their enemies are CG. It's just it's basically it's the Star Wars kid. They're all just doing the Star Wars kid thing on a much bigger production scale.
And that was honestly the problem I had when all the Jedi started coming in, is like, okay, you get a couple ones that we've already recognized. They light up their lightsabers. Mace Windu shows up, all the other ones. But then at a certain point, they start pulling in what I have to assume were cameo shots, like relatives of George Lucas or relatives of the producers that are coming in. They got a bit of prosthetics, and they're coming in like they light up the lightsaber. I saw one of them like even extend their hand as if they were using the Force. I'm like, there's nothing there yet. You literally are just doing that because you think it would look cool. And they just keep doing that. It's just a bit of fluff.
I mean, I am cynical, but I'm cynical in a different way. I think this is about, okay, we want to have 25 action figures of different Jedi, right? Yeah. So we have to have them all looking very distinct. I also would maybe say that, like, this devalues the Jedi. Like, I said this a lot in Phantom Menace, where I said that once you have like an active council who are just boring as Jedi, it kind of demystifies the whole. Because the thing with the original Star Wars is that, okay, there was this time of the Jedi, but it's gone, and there's maybe just one left who, this Luke could become the final Jedi kind of thing, right? There's a mystique to it. You've lost that already. What do you do to further lose that mystique? You basically have Jedi extras in this scene. You have like just these Jedi that show up who are just there to be Jedi in the background, and some of them die. Like we don't even get a good look at it, but it's clearly implied that some of them go down, and there's only like a small group of survivors here at the end by the time all the ships come in, because when this all ends, it seems like the Jedi are maybe going to lose eventually, But then that's when Yoda shows up with the clone army. And it's like, oh, I guess we're accepting the use of this clone army because we need it now because this is actually a war. So here we go.
We already paid for it. We're gonna use it. But no, you're right, because one of the Jedi comes up into Dooku's little pulpit area trying to attack Dooku, and then Jango just chumps the guy. He shoots him with a normal ass laser gun. The dude doesn't do anything to deflect the shots, and he just falls over the edge and dies.
Yeah, every other Jedi we have seen has been able to easily deflect regular blasters, like, you know, several shots per minute, like, easily. And yeah, Django just shoots him once, and that's it. He falls to his death. I was like, okay, what? So is there shit Jedi as well? Is this just the shit one? Like, what?
Yeah, probably. Also, can I just say, like, we didn't talk about it that much. The fight between Obi-Wan and Jango on the planet as he's trying to escape.
I didn't remember any of it. That's why I didn't talk about it.
It absolutely makes Jango look like such a chump. Like, he is such a failure of a bounty hunter, where all Obi-Wan is doing is just jumping around in the rain and kicking him in the face. And every single time he does this, like, oh, he lands once the wrong way and he loses his jetpack. It just goes flying. He lands the wrong way again and his gun goes flying off to the side. Like, every single time, it just feels like he has zero control over the fight whatsoever. Oh. But Boba Fett's supposed to be so cool, despite the fact that he was trained by such a loser.
You reminded me, actually. R2-D2's got jet rockets now.
Yes, he does. He does. I
have no comment to add. I just wanted to point it out.
That 100% was just me thinking, oh, George Lucas was thinking about the merchandising in video games, and he's like, yeah, but nobody's going to want to play as a slow droid. So what if he could fly now? What if that would be cool? What if he could fly?
So yeah, Dooku makes a break for it. It becomes this chase basically on the ships where they're chasing after him. He's trying to get to his exit strategy, whatever that is.
Yeah, you get all the foot soldiers of the droids and all the clones fighting against each other in this. Admittedly, it's a very cool looking visual. Like, it's set out in this desert. You get all the sand being kicked up. The laser lights are the only thing you can really see being exchanged. It's a decent visual.
Yeah, and there's a whole bit where Padme falls out the little drop ship they're in, and Anakin's like, oh, stop the ship. You have to put the ship down. I'm not leaving her behind. And Obi-Wan's like, hey, we could end this war if we stop Dooku right now. This is kind of important.
That's literally what he says, but all I heard is, stop thinking with your dick.
He eventually kind of breaks through to him and saying, hey, what would Padme do if she was in your position right now? And he's like, she would do her duty, damn it. I can have an argument for that. So Padme's fine, by the way. I mean, she didn't do it. This is the thing. It cuts to Padme a minute later getting up from after falling, and she gets some of the clones. She's like, hey, get us a ship and like a platoon. We have to go do a thing. And then she achieves nothing. She basically just shows up in time to shoot some shots at the ship that Dooku's leaving on, and it does nothing. She achieves nothing.
I love the fact, though, that she was totally fine, because that tells me that Anakin was just trying to go back for, like, good boy points. He was just, like, going to come back being like, no, I'm your knight in shine. I'm your density.
Yeah, because...
like, 100%.
Presumably he would sense that she's okay, because we've established that he can sense her.
Yeah, absolutely. He was just super scared that there were some Tusken Raiders on this planet, too. And if he left her behind... that's all it was.
Dear. So they go after Dooku, and the
ship drops them off. It manages to go like 3 feet away from the plane, like hangar area, and then it just explodes. And it's like, wow, good job, it made it that far.
So they're going towards Dooku, and Anakin's like, I've got him, and he runs in. And of course, Obi-Wan's like, no, don't do that, you idiot. And then Dooku just uses his force powers to have Anakin fly off to like the side of the room.
Yeah, Dooku's the first one we've seen chronologically that has the lightning powers that Palpatine has at the end. And he's like, check it out. He just flings him into the wall.
And then he tries to zap Obi-Wan. He sort of deflects it with his saber, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yes, I have way more force powers than you do, Obi-Wan. Oh, Qui-Gon trained you, didn't he? Yeah, he spoke highly of you. It's a shame this is the first we've met, because I liked him.
Practically my grandson. What with the whole training thing that we established here.
So they duel for a bit. Also, I should probably mention here, Dooku has what I can only describe as the limp dick lightsaber.
Depends on how he angles it. It could be the very curved rib for his pleasure.
Rib for his pleasure, should be.
Well, he's the one that's using it.
Sure, but I'm saying that wouldn't it be the other person who's receiving that would get the pleasure from it being angled up the way?
I'm going to go ahead and say the Dooku goes both ways on that one.
Okay, fair enough.
He gives me that vibe.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so yeah, what we're saying is though is the handle angles off at the top a little bit, so it comes out at a slight angle, but not that it really makes much of a difference once you're swinging it around, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's once again just so hey, when you're buying a lightsaber, you know that it's Dooku's. Yeah,
you can have now 6 different lightsabers because we've established 6 of them now in canon.
And don't forget Mace Windu's purple one now.
Yes,
now it's all the different ones. So yeah, the fight goes on. Obi-Wan's about to get smacked down, and then Anakin jumps back in and he pulls Obi-Wan's lightsaber in as well for like 10 seconds of a dual wielding fight before Dooku just gets rid of one of the lightsabers and then cuts off Anakin's other hand.
Well, to just a couple of things you lost over there. Obi-Wan throws him his lightsaber because Obi-Wan's actually injured at this point because he's slashed a couple times, so he's kind of down for the count. So he throws his lightsaber up so Anakin can dual wield. Like you say, it lasts a disappointing amount of time. I will say there is a little bit at the start of the one-on-one fight where like I could see the idea they had, which is, a lightsaber fight where all the lights go out, so the only thing lighting the scene is the lightsabers. That actually sounds like a cool visual idea.
Wasn't that the end of Empire? Wasn't that literally the fight?
No, you're thinking of Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi, that's right.
Yeah, but I think they were going for like it was like more of a flashing sort of thing. Like, this is more like in like Matt Reeves' Batman, where like the gunfire's lighting the scene up as Batman's like moving around. Like I think they were going for something like that, but the editing's so choppy that the effect of it's just kind of like lost.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But yes, so they're both down. He's going to crush both of them with some big debris, and that's when Yoda walks in.
Limps in at like half a meter an hour, and it's just like, oh, Dooku, how's it going?
Turns out he's just as powerful at the Force as Dooku is with the lightning powers and whatnot. So eventually Dooku's like, you know what? We're clearly equal matched when it comes to the Force. I guess we'll just have to see who's better with a lightsaber. So Yoda whips out his saber, and we get CG Yoda doing flips and flips and flips, and just when you thought you couldn't have had more flips, he flips some more.
Once again, I can see the writer's room. Yes. I can see George Lucas saying, yeah, we keep saying Yoda's this great guy, but we never actually get to see him fight, so I thought that'd be cool if we make him fight. Not thinking through the ramifications of, you got a 6-foot-tall Christopher Lee trying to fight against a 2-foot-tall Yoda. How do you make that happen? More flips.
Look, I'm not going to say it's impossible to have made a Yoda lightsaber fight work. I think there's probably some ways to pull it off. However, this was not it. This was a little bit silly. It just kind of, I don't know. It means that everything has to be CG, right? It means that Yoda the entire time has to just be the CG thing. And all I could imagine in my head was like Christopher Lee on set having to like act out this and
it strikes me that they just had like a little like cat toy, like a laser pointer, and he was just like swing here, swing here, swing here, and they're just like zooming it around real quick. Ultimately, though, Dooku is able to get away. He does not lose. He almost drops that giant pillar on them, and Yoda's like, I got to catch it, but then Dooku gets in the ship. And
it basically buys him time to get out. Yeah, so Yoda chooses saving them rather than catching Dooku. So Dooku gets away, and he meets with clearly the Emperor, also clearly Palpatine, but I mean, you know, they're not revealing it technically yet. The hood's still kind of over his face.
It's weird how they both sound like Ian McDiarmid, but whatever.
Yeah, and basically it's like, yeah, I've been working for you, and it kind of sounds like, yeah, he's kind of behind both armies, because the whole point of this is just to get him power, so that, you know, hey, it's a time of war, so now you have to give me all this extra power. Oh, my plan is going, you know, accordingly. So I think Palpatine is behind the creation of both armies.
Oh yeah.
So
I mean, as much as I said at the beginning, Sifo Dyas, this whole thing of, he was a idealist who had the army thing going on. They keep saying that he was killed like 10 years ago, like right after he placed the order. It's implied that that is Palpatine and Dooku who were involved with the have him place the order and then we'll kill him. And now we know about it, but we're just going to let it sit. Because obviously, spoilers for episode 3, these clones need to have a way to kill Jedi kind of programmed into them.
I don't remember any of that, but I'm sure we'll find out when we get to it.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's one quick scene with them. The movie kind of leaves off on a couple of notes. One is that, okay, we've got our army now. Palpatine's in charge of everything, and it's all very dour. They play the what would you even call it? The Imperial March.
Yeah, the Imperial March theme
at the end. Like, and hey, the Sith's in power basically now.
Yeah, and Obi-Wan is talking to Mace Windu and Yoda, and it's just like, hey, should we believe what Dooku said about a Sith being in control of the Senate? And they're like, nah, Dooku lies. It's like, okay, but like, maybe we should keep an eye on the Senate a little bit. They're like, fine, if we gotta.
Yeah, what's funny is that I was telling the truth technically about that.
Right, absolutely. It's like, maybe there's a guy who just assumed total control of the Senate, and this guy says that the Sith is in control of the Senate. Maybe we should pay attention to that.
Yeah, no one even raises the question, should we look into Palpatine a bit and see if he's got anything going on? But no.
There's more of that in the 3rd episode, trust me.
But what the movie actually ends on, right, is the wedding of Padme and...
No, Adme and Panakin, and I will die on this hill.
They kiss. He's got a robot hand, just like Luke had at the end of the 2nd movie. And then they look out into the sun and
mirroring the exact pose that Leia and Luke were in at the end of Empire.
Yep,
looking out at the planets.
Cut to credits.
Written by George Lucas.
And 2 other people, I think. But
directed by George Lucas.
But yeah, he was
George Lucas.
He was there. Yep. It's a giant sack of shit. It's somehow worse than Phantom Menace, and we were not positive about that in any way, shape, or form.
Nope.
See, this is the thing. It continues most of the things that were bad about Phantom Menace, right? Mm-hmm. It absolutely does. All the prequely problems that we talked about in that review are still apply here, pretty much by and large. And then it has the awful romance. It has the horrible pacing. It has what feels like even worse action scenes. Yep. With the CG, with the fact that they all seem like just fluff because they're obstacles that don't really need to be there other than just because we need to have an action scene, rather than, oh, this feels like a natural predicament based on what was going on that adds in some way to the themes of the story.
Honestly, I don't know how you pull it out without restructuring everything in the story, because it is wildly different.
No, you have to, but like don't get me wrong, even good action movies don't always get this done, right? Especially ones that don't have a lot of like depth, and that's fine if that's what they are. But ideally, you'd want some of the action scenes to feel like, oh, we've been building up to this the whole movie, we've been building up to this showdown, or in the best case scenario, oh, you can see kind of what this action scene represents for the character's story at this point, like, oh, I don't know, let's say Anakin is in an action sequence where he's trying to get to Padme and she keeps getting pulled away, and that represents that where they are in the relationship is that he keeps trying to get to her, but she, I don't know, like, or at the very least it could feed into how they feel about each other after the scene or something. But no, none of the action scenes by and large actually have any real effect until the 3rd act, where it's actually just the story ending.
And even if you ignore the idea of like theming and them like playing up character bits, it also like there's no stakes.
Yes,
there is absolutely no feeling that any of these action scenes are going to result in the death of any character or even like a mild maiming. And that's not because they're prequels. That's not because we know where they end up. Just within the scenes themselves, they feel so static and flat. It doesn't feel like there's any actual energy in any of them.
Yep. So there you go.
Yeah,
that's the movie. David, what is your scene of Attack of the Clones?
Oh god, that's actually a tough one. Do I answer ironically and stupidly? Maybe. Because, I mean, I can't really point to a scene in this movie and say, this is the thing that, like, really sold me on it. You know, this is the thing that I said, maybe I'll give this movie a chance. Because there wasn't one. There wasn't a scene like that. As much as I would compliment that scene of him riding off on the speeder to go save his mom, it nowhere was enough to save the movie. It wasn't even trying to be. So I think I'll probably have to go for the more tongue-in-cheek answer. And I'm going to say... it's the meadow scene. I'm going to say it's the scene where he's just casually saying, like, you know, fascism's got its high points too. And she just kind of is like, no, please don't say that. And he just is like, whatever. It's between that or the emotional, I slaughtered them all, like women and children and whatnot. But I think that there's something that just encapsulates how bad the writing is in that first sequence that isn't quite encapsulated in the second one. So I'm going to give it to that.
I guess based on what I said, the obvious answer for me is when he stands up and says, I'm going to go get my mum, and everyone else assumes she's dead. Because it's the closest to an actual genuine decent idea of like rating the character when every other scene fails miserably at, you know, making him likable or empathetic or anyone you would want to ever root for. And you should want to root for, even though we know he's going to turn out to be Darth Vader, we should want to root for him first.
Yeah.
Hence the tragedy. All right. MVP of Attack of the Clones.
I gotta give this to my girl, the one, the only Shmi Skywalker. In the best death scene I've ever seen. No. I mean, kind of in a lot of ways, because I don't have any good options here. I don't think anyone really turned in a stellar performance. I think that Natalie Portman did a decent job with what she was given. I think she was able to at least still put some inflection in there.
Oh, sure, but like what she was given was some of the worst of the whole movie.
Right, exactly.
She had to sell not being interested in this character and then just doing a 180 for basically no reason.
She definitely sold the not being interested. I'll give her that. Christopher Lee also very. He was able to inject a little bit of charisma into a role that honestly probably shouldn't have much at all. So I'll give him that as well. But honestly, not a lot of roles are standing out. So I think I'll give it to Christopher Lee as Count Dooku. I think that the presence and the gravitas he brings is the only thing that's even like a mild sort of casting star in this. I think that everyone else is just muscling their way through the script as best they can. He's the only one who comes out of it not covered in shit.
Yeah, I was going to say Christopher Lee as well, but it's basically just because he has a presence. He brings some gravitas with him that no one in this movie has. Like, he feels like and he is from the era, to be fair, but he feels like he's from the era of the actors and characters who were in the original movies. So even though his character is not remotely as good as any of those characters, he brings them with that sense of gravitas. In the same way that putting Peter Cushing or Alec Guinness in roles in the original trilogy made a lot of sense. This is the closest it possibly gets to feeling like those choices are being made again, but this is the best as you can do, really. So yeah. All right, what are you rating Attack of the Clones?
I gave Phantom Menace a 4. And I do have to put this below that. And I think some people would argue that point. I think some people would say that the entire plot of Phantom Menace is just so much more dry with like the Trade Federation and the taxation routes and all that sort of stuff. But at the very minimum, it took the time to have fun moments that actually impacted the plot. Whereas I felt this entire like middle hour and a half of this movie was just a slog that was eventually going to dump us into the third act.
I'll put it this way, right? There's at least, like, Phantom Menace isn't good. It's got structure problems. It's got, and some of the plot choices are just annoying and absurd. But there's at least sections of that movie where one thing, admittedly not the start. The start's actually really awkward of the Phantom Menace. But once it gets to Tatooine, there is like this knock-on effect of things that makes somewhat sense, which is
Right.
we meet this kid. Oh, he's got the Force. We want to free him. So, okay, how do we free him? We need the money for that and the part to get off the thing. Oh, that leads to the pod race. Blah blah blah. Like, there's like a knock-on effect, at least until they leave that planet, where everything kind of flows. The problem with that is connecting that to the first act and the last act isn't quite smooth. But at least there's chunks of that movie where it feels like one thing influences the next.
Yeah, it felt like the majority of the movie followed cause and effect, whereas this is the exact opposite, where it felt like majority of the movie was just, and then this happens, and then this happens, and it didn't quite have any sort of straightforward plot to it. So
yeah, I think the big thing is with Obi-Wan's side of the plot, it basically boils down to he discovers that villains are making a droid army at planet. That's it. That's the important thing he finds out in his side of the plot. And everything that is from where he starts to when he finally makes that discovery and messages it back to everyone else is just filler for action sequences and things like that to pad out the movie. And then the other side of it is a romance, which does not follow cause and effect because it feels like there is no knock-on effect. It feels like we just keep repeating things until all of a sudden she seems to be kind of into it.
If it followed cause and effect, when the cause is the dude who's into you just committed some light genocide, the effect is you run. Turns out we don't follow that in space. So all in all, I'm going to say that it does, of course, still have studio work behind it. It's not the worst thing that's ever been put to cinema. I'm nowhere near that close, but it has some major, major problems that just keep compounding over the course of the movie, that by the time you hit the end, it's not even close to enough to save it. I think I'm going to come down at a 2.5.
Yeah, I think for me it's a straight 2.
Okay.
It's, you know, like, it's about as bad as a movie of this level can be, really. Like a movie with this budget, right? I mean, when I think about movies in this bracket, movies that are, let's say $200 million, because I'm sure this probably costs more than that, right?
I'm sure, yeah.
Right? Here we go. List of expensive movies. How expensive are we talking here? Okay, so I'm just scanning a list on Wikipedia, right, which they've deemed as the expensive movies of the world, and I'm going down the list, and I would not expect to find anything that I think is as bad as this, because even stuff that I do think is bad, like Justice League, it's not as bad as Attack of the Clones. You know,
this movie cost, according to it, I don't know if this is adjusted for inflation, but it cost $115 million.
That's not adjusted for inflation, no.
Okay, so
and you never adjust for inflation unless you specify you're adjusting for inflation. You never adjust for inflation when you're talking about movie budgets or box office. Like maybe there's one or two that I've not seen that might be worse, but I mean, Hobbit 3 maybe is in the ballpark, perhaps.
Yeah,
but even that,
yeah.
Because the one that sprung to mind when I was trying to think of this, and the reason why I was trying to think of this when I was watching the movie is because Red Letter Media, Rich Evans from Red Letter Media, he's said this a few times that he considers Attack of the Clones to be the worst movie ever made relative to its budget, right? And I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, wait, is that true? And the one that popped out in my head to compare it to was the second Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen. And I stopped and I thought about it for a second. I went, you know what? No, Revenge of the Fallen, as much as this pains me to say it, is at least a little bit more interesting than Attack of the Clones, because it's at least doing dumb stuff constantly. And if nothing else, as much as I think it's edited really haphazardly and whatnot, it never feels flat like we keep saying Attack of the Clones feels. Like it's at least got impressive effects, if nothing else.
No, I agree. So, I think that this movie is 100% like, I don't know where the money feels like it probably went more towards advertising and licensing than it did towards the movie itself.
Yeah. So there you go. That is that's Attack of the Clones. A 2 and a 2.5. That's what you're getting from us.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animals.
Yep. David's got his homework movie in a second, but just before he brings that up, I will remind you can support us if you want to over on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Helps keep the show coming, as well as Collector's Cut, the other movie podcast that me and David do, and Screams After Midnight that I do with Tim, the horror movie podcast. You can support all of that and get some bonuses, including 2 monthly shows from me and David. One is the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection, and then the other is Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made, including Hot Frosty, which is a new Christmas movie that was a Netflix original this holiday season, and someone picked it for us, and it was garbage.
I went to visit some family over this most recent weekend, and they were like, "Oh, what should we put on?" And I tried to make the case of, you guys got to check out Hot Frosty.
You must not like those family members very much.
I want them to understand what I have to go through.
So yeah, if you want to get that stuff and help support the show, you can do that over at Patreon, or you can do it via YouTube membership as well. I recommend Patreon just because it covers both YouTube channels, but if you want to just specifically support the movie channel, YouTube membership's a valid option. You can check those stuff out there too. So that is everything except David's homework movie.
Well, before my homework, one thing I do want to point out is next week's episode, we do have a very special one. We are doing the 80s countdown.
Oh, yes. We're both going to go make our top 25 sci-fi movies of the 80s lists, and we'll reveal them. We'll alternate. It's been a while since we've done one of these. In fact, this is the first time David's done one, so it's been a while.
And I only bring that up because I have been using this homework to study 80s movies for the entire time I've been on this show.
That is correct. So what was this week's homework movie?
Well, this week I decided to do the last one. Based off of you and Tara's ratings, I didn't think it would make the list, but it did seem like one that I should watch. And that was the original Tron.
Okay.
So you and Tara both gave that around like a 6 to 6.5.
Joe, it's interesting, just a little peek behind the curtain here, is that David kind of implied before we started that his homework movie was a slog. So I feel like I've got a sneaking... I mean, I assume you liked it more than Attack of the Clones, because it's obviously better than that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No doubt. At least that had some creativity put into it. But I will say, Tron feels like a tech demo. It feels like this is something that we had some cool special effects for, and so we strung together the most basic story we could possibly imagine. And by the time it ended, I didn't even feel like the movie ended. Like, it just kind of stops. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's it then.
I mean, I agree, but to be fair, at least for 1981, 82, it was an impressive tech demo.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I am 100%, like, even looking at it then, knowing the time it came out, I am amazed they managed to pull off what they did. It is an absolute feat of technologic innovation there, but maybe hire, like, an extra screenwriter or something to just, like, give you an extra little dose of, here's some stuff that could go into this. Like, we're talking about pacing, we're talking about structure in Attack of the Clones. This one does not hit the same level of sins, but it commits different sins where, like, I felt in the first part of the movie, I had zero grasp on what the hell was going on just because of the way they were bouncing between the digital world and the real world and what stuff mattered and what stuff didn't. It was a mess. And then add on top of it the fact that looking back on it now, the sort of metaphors they were going for with the digital world just kind of don't make sense at all. Like, oh, you know, everyone just talks in plain English to their programs instead of just enter, program runs. Like, it's a little bit confused in that setting. But as a tech demo, as showing off this new skill of CGI they had built up there, it is a great feat in that. I'm not going to argue that point. All in all, it does have to balance itself out a little bit there, and it is kind of a mess to try to sit through the plot of it, as basic as it may seem. So I think I'm probably going to come down even lower than you are, Tara, and I'm going to give it a 5.5.
All right, fair enough. Plus Tron 3's coming next year, so you need to be caught up.
Be set on that. Yep.
Yeah. You get ready for the Jared Leto Tron movie.
Oh no. I didn't realize he was in that. How is he going to character act a digital world?
Honestly, there's some overacting in the other sequel, so I could see how he does it.
All right.
So yeah,
can't wait.
You've got about I don't know how many months until that, but you could fit in.
I felt like it was end of the year. Was it not end of the year?
It's late in the year, yeah. So you've got maybe a year to watch Tron Legacy.
I'll fit it in. Honestly, the big thing I'm going to have problems fitting in is all the Jurassic Parks before Jurassic Park 7.
Wait, is that next year?
Yeah, that's July 8th. Is
that not 2026?
Not according to the schedule you've provided me.
That's probably right. I just, for some reason in my head, I thought it was further down the line. Fair enough. It's only 6 movies. It'll be fine.
Yeah, okay.
It'll be fine. All right. That is the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully you've having or had a nice Christmas. And we will see you next time for a end of year countdown episode. So thank you once again for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer ad salsa.